A rancher rescued a young Apache girl from drowning, and now she follows him everywhere. The sun was already leaning low in the sky when the rancher finished checking the fence near the river. It was a wide, slow afternoon, the kind that made time feel heavy and calm at the same moment. The land stretched far and open, covered in dry grass, scattered trees, and the steady sound of insects. The river ran quietly along the edge of the ranch, usually gentle, usually safe. The rancher had walked this land for years and thought he knew every sound it made. That day, something felt different. As he turned to head back, he heard a sharp splash. It was not the sound of an animal crossing the water. It was louder, desperate, uneven. He stopped walking. For a moment he listened carefully, his body still, his eyes focused on the riverbank ahead. Then he heard it again, a weak cry, almost lost under the moving water. He dropped everything and ran. When he reached the river, he saw a small figure struggling in the water. A young girl was being pulled by the current, her arms moving wildly, her head dipping below the surface again and again. Her dark hair was heavy with water, clinging to her face. She was too tired, too small, and clearly could not fight the river anymore. The rancher did not stop to think. He ran straight into the water, boots and all. The cold hit him hard, but he pushed forward, fighting the pull of the current. When he reached her, she was barely holding on. Her eyes were wide with fear. She tried to grab him, but her hands slipped. He caught her firmly and pulled her against his chest. With effort, he moved back toward the shore, step by step, until his feet touched solid ground. When he finally laid her down on the riverbank, she coughed and gasped, water spilling from her mouth. She shook uncontrollably, her small body weak and exhausted. The rancher knelt beside her, breathing hard himself. He checked her carefully, making sure she was alive, making sure she could breathe. After a few moments, her breathing slowed. She was still shaking, but the danger had passed. She looked up at him then. Her eyes were dark, filled with fear, confusion, and something else, something older than her age. She said nothing, not a single word. He spoke softly, trying not to scare her. He asked her if she was hurt, if she could understand him. She did not answer. She only watched him closely, as if memorizing his face, as if afraid he might disappear. The rancher noticed her clothes. They were worn, damp, and not like what children from nearby towns usually wore. There was dirt on her hands and marks on her arms, signs of long days outdoors. He realized she had not just fallen into the river by accident. She had likely been alone for some time. He took off his jacket and gently placed it around her shoulders. She flinched at first but did not pull away. Slowly, she wrapped it around herself. He could feel her trembling calm just a little. "Come on," he said quietly, holding out his hand. "You're safe now." She hesitated. Her eyes moved from his face to his hand. Then slowly she reached out and took it. The walk back to the ranch house was slow. The girl stayed close to him, almost pressing against his side. Every few steps she looked around, alert and cautious, as if expecting something bad to happen. The rancher noticed this and adjusted his pace, staying calm, not rushing her. When they reached the house, he brought her inside and sat her near the fireplace. He handed her a towel and showed her how to dry her hair. She copied his actions carefully. He gave her water, then food. She ate slowly at first, watching him the entire time, but hunger soon took over. It was clear she had not eaten well in days. As she ate, he studied her quietly. She was young, but there was a strength in her posture even now. He noticed details, the way she held herself, the symbols on a small necklace she wore. He realized she was Apache, a child far from her people. The thought weighed heavily on him. He knew the world outside his ranch was not always kind. He knew history had not been kind either. This girl had survived something hard. He could see it in her eyes. They were the eyes of someone who had learned to be careful. When she finished eating, she did not move away. Instead, she stayed where she was, sitting close to the chair where he stood. When he walked across the room, she followed him with her eyes. When he stepped outside to bring in more wood, she stood up quickly, fear flashing across her face, and moved toward the door. He stopped and turned back to her. "I'm not leaving," he said gently. "I'll be right here." She did not understand every word, but she understood the tone. She sat back down, but her eyes stayed fixed on the door until he returned. That night, the rancher prepared a small bed for her near the fire. He gave her clean clothes and showed her where to sleep. She lay down but did not close her eyes right away. She watched him move around the room, making sure he stayed within sight. When he finally sat down across from her, she relaxed just enough to sleep. The rancher did not sleep much that night. He sat in the quiet, listening to the crackle of the fire and the soft breathing of the child he had pulled from the river. His mind was full of questions. Where had she come from? Where was her family? How long had she been alone? He knew that soon people would ask questions. He knew that doing the right thing would not be easy. But as he looked at the small figure resting peacefully for the first time in who knew how long, he felt something settle inside him. He had saved her life. And somehow, he already knew that this rescue was not just a single moment. It was the beginning of something that would change them both forever. The next morning, the rancher woke to the quiet sounds of the ranch. The sun had barely risen, but the birds were already singing, and the wind moved gently through the trees. When he walked to the kitchen, he saw her sitting at the table, carefully folding the blanket he had given her the night before. She looked up as he entered, her dark eyes watching him closely, filled with a mixture of curiosity and caution. He poured himself a cup of coffee and then made some warm milk for her. She hesitated at first, unsure, but when he handed it to her, she accepted it quietly. She sipped slowly, as if testing the safety of the drink, and then drank faster when she realized it was good. The rancher smiled. Even small signs of trust felt like victories. After breakfast, he stepped outside to check the horses. To his surprise, she followed him. She stayed close, walking on the side of the fence, watching him work. He noticed that she seemed fascinated by everything: the sound of the horses' hooves, the way the dogs barked in the distance, the movement of the cows in the pasture. Her eyes sparkled with curiosity, though there was also a shadow of caution, as if she had learned that not everything in the world was safe. He started teaching her small tasks. First, he showed her how to fill the water troughs. She was careful, making sure the water did not spill too much, but she smiled quietly when she did it right. Then, he introduced her to the animals one by one. The horses were the hardest, large and strong, but she approached them with patience, learning to stroke their necks and speak softly so they would not be afraid. The rancher watched her closely. He had never seen a child so young show such determination and care. As the day went on, he tried to talk to her about herself. He asked simple questions, pointing to things around them. "What's your name? Where are you from?" She shook her head at first, too shy or too frightened to answer. But gradually, in broken words and gestures, she began to tell him small pieces of her story. She had been separated from her family while traveling with a small group. She had been alone for days, trying to survive. Every detail she shared was like a puzzle piece, helping him understand the strength and courage she had carried with her. While she followed him around the ranch, she started helping in her own small ways. She would pick up tools he dropped, sweep the porch, or carry buckets of water when he asked. The rancher noticed her growing confidence. She still moved cautiously around strangers, but she was learning that in this place she could feel safe. However, not everyone in the area was kind or understanding. When neighbors saw her on the ranch, questions began. Where did the girl come from? They would ask. Is she okay? Shouldn't she be with family? The rancher answered as best he could, explaining that she had been rescued from the river and that he was making sure she was safe. Some neighbors were supportive, others suspicious. The whispers followed them whenever they went into town, but the rancher tried not to let it affect him or the girl. She began to form small routines. Every morning, she would follow him to the barn, watch him feed the animals, and try to imitate his actions. He would show her how to sweep the barn floor, how to check the animals' water, and how to repair fences. She learned quickly. It was remarkable how she absorbed everything, her small hands working carefully, her dark eyes focused. He realized she had grown up in a world that required strength, even as a child. Their days were quiet, yet full of learning. Sometimes she would wander a little farther than usual, exploring the edges of the ranch with wide-eyed fascination. He always let her, as long as she stayed within sight, and she seemed to know instinctively when she needed to return to his side. Every evening they would sit on the porch together, watching the sun dip behind the distant hills. She would draw in the dirt with a stick or simply watch the sky, sometimes leaning against him without a word. The rancher noticed her small gestures of trust. She began to smile when he approached, though her smiles were shy and rare. Sometimes when he laughed at something simple, a horse stumbling, a dog chasing its tail, she would laugh too, the sound light and musical. Those moments became precious, signs that the fear she had carried for so long was slowly easing. He also saw how careful she was with him. When he looked away, she would not wander too far. When strangers came to the ranch, she would hide behind him until she felt safe. He understood that she had learned to protect herself in a world that could be harsh, and he respected her caution. He never forced her to do anything. Every step of trust she offered was earned, and he knew patience was the only way forward. The girl started giving him small gifts, in her own way. Sometimes it was a feather she found near the river, other times a stone that shone in the sunlight. She would hand it to him quietly, her eyes bright with pride. The rancher accepted every gift with gratitude, careful to show her that her kindness mattered. It became a silent language between them, a way to show care without words. In the afternoons, they would work in the fields together. He showed her how to plant seeds, how to water young plants, and how to notice changes in the soil. She loved the earth beneath her fingers, the sun on her face, and the satisfaction of work well done. He was impressed by her patience and attention to detail. Despite her small frame, she had energy and determination that reminded him of the best qualities of his own family, long gone from his life. Evenings brought quiet reflection. They would sit by the fire, her small body curled close to his side. He would tell stories of the land, of the ranch, of animals he had cared for over the years. She listened, wide-eyed, sometimes asking questions in her own way, sometimes just nodding. He realized that these small moments were teaching her something he had not expected. He was showing her that life could be safe, that trust could exist, and that someone could care for her without expecting anything in return. But life was not without its challenges. There were moments when she became frightened, a sudden noise, a dog barking unexpectedly, or someone knocking on the door. During these times, she would cling to him, her small hands gripping his arm. He would soothe her with quiet words and steady presence. Slowly, she learned that these moments were temporary, that she did not need to be afraid all the time. The rancher also began to think about her future. He knew she could not stay with him forever. He knew her family, if they could be found, would want her back. But at the same time, he felt a sense of responsibility that went beyond duty. He wanted to protect her, to teach her, to give her a chance to feel safe and strong. Every day with her was a reminder of how fragile life could be, and how much one small act, like saving a child from a river, could change the course of many lives. As days turned into weeks, the bond between them grew stronger. She would wake up and immediately look for him. She would follow him everywhere, not out of fear, but out of trust and a sense of belonging. He began to feel a warmth he had not felt in years, a connection that reminded him that life could still bring unexpected joy. The rancher also noticed the little ways she began to care for him. She would bring him a cup of water when he worked in the sun, quietly adjust his tools when he dropped them, or simply sit beside him in silence, offering her presence as comfort. These small acts spoke more than words ever could. They showed a mutual respect and affection that transcended the difficulty of her past and his solitude. One day, a neighbor came by and asked questions about the girl again. The rancher explained carefully that she had been rescued and that he was helping her while looking for her family. The neighbor nodded, but the rancher could see the concern in their eyes. He realized that not everyone would understand the bond forming between him and the child. Some would question it, some might even challenge it, but he also knew that his priority was her safety and nothing else mattered more. By now, the girl had begun to laugh more freely, to move with less caution, and to participate fully in life on the ranch. She learned quickly, absorbing every lesson, every small task, every story. The rancher watched her with pride, sometimes shaking his head in disbelief at her strength and resilience. He had rescued her from the river, yes, but she was teaching him too, about courage, about trust, and about the quiet beauty of a human connection that needed no words. Even as the days continued, he remained vigilant. The girl's past was unknown, and the world outside the ranch could be unpredictable. He knew there would be challenges ahead. But for now, he focused on the small victories, the way she smiled when she completed a task, the way she followed him willingly, the way she slowly let herself feel safe. By the end of the second week, it was clear that they had become a team. She depended on him for safety, guidance, and support. He depended on her for companionship, for the joy that had long been missing from his life. Their days were filled with work, small lessons, laughter, and quiet reflection. Each moment reinforced their bond, and each day added new layers of trust and understanding. The rancher realized that the girl's presence had changed the rhythm of the ranch. Life felt fuller, richer, and more meaningful. The quiet solitude he had once cherished was replaced with the soft sounds of her laughter, the careful movements of her small hands, and the steady reassurance of her trust. He understood that he had not just saved her life in the river, he had become a part of her journey, and she had become a part of his. As the sun set on another day, he sat on the porch, watching her tend to the small garden they had started together. She moved carefully, her eyes bright with focus, and glanced up at him from time to time. He nodded silently in approval, and she smiled, a little more freely than the day before. The rancher knew that this was just the beginning. Their bond was strong, but the journey ahead would test them both. And yet, for the first time in many years, he felt ready to face whatever came next, knowing that they would face it together. The days on the ranch had grown into a comfortable rhythm. The girl followed the rancher everywhere he went, helping with chores, learning about the animals, and exploring the land at her own cautious pace. She had grown stronger since the day he rescued her from the river, and her trust in him was becoming more evident with each passing moment. But beneath the quiet routine, shadows of her past were beginning to emerge, reminding the rancher that life outside the ranch could be harsh and unpredictable. One morning, as the rancher was checking the fences along the pasture, he noticed her sitting on a rock near the edge of the river. She was holding a small bundle of sticks and stones, arranging them carefully on the ground. He approached quietly, not wanting to startle her. She looked up at him with wide, serious eyes, her small fingers stilling in the middle of their work. "Good morning," he said softly, kneeling beside her. She nodded but did not speak. He realized she had not yet found the words to describe everything she had experienced. Her silence was not only shyness, it was the weight of memories too heavy for a child to carry. He sat beside her, waiting patiently, letting her decide when to share if she ever chose to. After a few minutes, she began to point at the ground, at the small stones she had collected, and then at her chest. The rancher guessed she was trying to tell him about where she had come from. Slowly, in broken words and gestures, she revealed that she had been traveling with a small group, likely her family or community, when something went wrong. She had become separated and had wandered alone for days, searching for help, food, or water. Every detail she shared made him more aware of the strength and courage she had shown just to survive. He listened carefully, never interrupting. He realized how important it was for her to be heard, even if the words were incomplete or unclear. Her story was a puzzle, pieces scattered and fragile, but each piece mattered. He promised himself silently that he would do everything he could to protect her and help her find her family if possible. Over the next few days, he began to teach her more practical skills that would help her feel even safer and more capable. He showed her how to gather firewood, how to clean and feed the animals, and how to notice small changes in the weather that might signal rain or danger. She learned quickly, her small hands moving carefully but confidently, her eyes bright with focus. The rancher admired her determination. He had rescued her from the river, yes, but she was rescuing herself every day through her courage and adaptability. But life outside the ranch was beginning to assert itself. One afternoon, a neighbor came by to check on the rancher and noticed the girl sitting on the porch, quietly observing the world around her. The neighbor's expression shifted from curiosity to concern. "Who is this child?" they asked. "Is she safe? Shouldn't she be with her family?" The rancher explained the situation calmly, emphasizing that he had rescued her from a dangerous river and was ensuring she had food, shelter, and safety until her family could be found. The neighbor nodded, but he could see the doubt in their eyes. He realized that not everyone would understand the bond forming between him and the girl. Some might judge him, question his actions, or even report him to the authorities. He made a mental note to be cautious and to act in her best interest no matter what others thought. The girl, meanwhile, had begun to explore the edges of the ranch with more confidence. She would wander to the barn, inspect the tools, or watch the horses from a safe distance. The rancher allowed her this freedom, knowing that independence was important for her growth. He also knew that trust had to be balanced with caution. He would always keep an eye on her, ready to intervene if anything dangerous appeared. One day, while checking the fields, he noticed that she had begun to mimic his movements. She would sweep the barn floor the way he did, handle the water buckets with care, and even attempt to repair fences alongside him. It amazed him how quickly she adapted to the routines of the ranch. Her small body moved with surprising grace and attention to detail, and her eyes shone with pride whenever she completed a task correctly. Despite these moments of progress, there were times when her past intruded on the present. A sudden noise, a branch snapping, a dog barking, or someone shouting in the distance would make her flinch, her small hands gripping his arm tightly. The rancher would kneel beside her, speaking in a gentle, steady voice until her fear subsided. Slowly, she began to understand that these moments were temporary and that she could feel safe without constant danger around her. As the bond between them strengthened, he began to notice subtle signs of her past struggles. Small scars on her arms, calloused hands, and the careful way she observed strangers all spoke of a life filled with hardship before she had met him. He never asked her to explain everything at once, knowing that trust and comfort came gradually. He allowed her to reveal her past in her own time, in her own way. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sun set behind the hills, the girl suddenly pointed toward the horizon. The rancher followed her gesture, and she made small gestures with her hands and face, trying to communicate something important. After some patient effort, he realized she was trying to describe where her family had been traveling before she got lost. She spoke in broken words and gestures, but he understood enough to know that locating her community would be a challenge. Yet he also realized how important it was for her to reconnect with them, if possible. Days passed, and the girl's curiosity about the world around her grew stronger. She asked questions about the animals, the plants, and the land. She watched carefully whenever he repaired fences or built structures, sometimes helping him lift small tools or hold pieces in place. He encouraged her efforts, careful not to overwhelm her, and praised her when she did well. Each day she learned something new, and each day her confidence grew. But with growth came tension. The rancher knew that her family might come looking for her at any time, and he wanted to prepare her for that possibility. He also knew that some adults in the town might misunderstand their bond and challenge him. The girl sensed these tensions too. Sometimes she would sit quietly for hours, staring at the river or the distant hills, lost in thought. He never pushed her to speak. Instead, he sat beside her, sharing the silence, letting her feel that she was safe and valued. One afternoon, while they were walking along the edge of the pasture, the girl suddenly stopped. She knelt on the ground and began picking up small stones, arranging them carefully in a pattern. The rancher watched her quietly, curious. After a moment, he realized that she was trying to recreate something from her past, a memory of a place she had known, perhaps even a way of communicating what she had been through. He knelt beside her, studying the patterns, and offered gentle words of encouragement. She looked up at him, eyes wide, and for a brief moment smiled. These small gestures of trust and communication became more frequent. She would bring him a feather, a stone, or a piece of wood, handing it to him quietly as if to say, "I trust you, and I want you to see what matters to me." He accepted each gift with gratitude, showing her that her care and attention were valued. Over time, these simple exchanges became a language between them, one that required no words, only understanding and mutual respect. Evenings were the time for quiet reflection. They would sit by the fire, the girl curled up near his side, listening to his stories of the ranch, of the animals, and of life in the area. Sometimes she would ask questions in her own way, using gestures or broken words. Other times, she would simply nod, absorbing the information in silence. The rancher realized that these moments were teaching her more than any task or chore ever could. He was showing her that life could be safe, that trust could exist, and that someone could care for her without expecting anything in return. Yet, despite the progress, the rancher remained aware of the world beyond the ranch. He knew that eventually, her family or community might come looking, and that there would be questions, challenges, and decisions to face. He also knew that protecting her until then was his responsibility. Each day he felt the weight of this duty, but he also felt the deep satisfaction of seeing her grow stronger, happier, and more secure. As the weeks went by, their bond continued to deepen. She woke up each morning eager to see him, followed him across the ranch, and learned something new every day. He, in turn, found joy in her presence, a warmth he had not experienced in years. Their lives had become intertwined, each depending on the other in ways both small and significant. The rancher also noticed the little ways she began to care for him. She would bring him water while he worked, hand him small tools when needed, or simply sit quietly nearby, offering comfort through her presence. These acts, though small, spoke volumes about the trust and affection growing between them. They had become more than rescuer and rescued. They were becoming family in a sense neither had experienced before. One evening, as the sun set and the sky turned shades of orange and pink, he realized how much the girl had changed. She was still cautious, still careful, but she had grown stronger, braver, and more trusting. She had survived alone for so long, and now she was learning that she did not have to face the world by herself. The rancher felt a sense of pride, knowing that his protection, guidance, and patience had helped her begin to heal. He also realized that their journey was far from over. There were challenges ahead, including finding her family and ensuring she could safely reconnect with them. But for now, he focused on the present, on her growth, her trust, and the quiet joy of having her by his side. He knew that every day they spent together was a step forward, not just for her, but for him as well. The girl, too, had begun to feel the safety and care she had been missing for so long. She smiled more freely, laughed more often, and began to speak in small, broken sentences. She learned the rhythms of the ranch, the needs of the animals, and the quiet lessons of life in the open land. Most importantly, she learned that she could trust someone fully, that she could feel protected, and that she had a place where she belonged. By the end of this period, it was clear that their bond was unbreakable. She followed him willingly, trusted him deeply, and began to participate fully in life on the ranch. He watched her with admiration, aware that she had taught him as much about courage, trust, and resilience as he had taught her about survival and care. Life on the ranch had changed forever. The quiet routine of work, the rhythm of the seasons, and the gentle beauty of the land were now intertwined with the presence of a young girl who had survived the river, who had trusted him, and who had begun to teach him the true meaning of care and family. Their story was only beginning, but the bond they had formed would carry them through whatever challenges lay ahead. Life on the ranch had become a delicate balance of trust, routine, and care. The girl continued to follow the rancher everywhere, her small footsteps keeping pace with his larger ones. She had grown stronger, more confident, and more comfortable in her surroundings. She laughed more often, spoke in small, broken sentences, and even began helping with the more challenging tasks on the ranch. But the quiet peace they had built was about to be tested. One afternoon, as the rancher and the girl were repairing a section of the fence near the edge of the pasture, a rider appeared in the distance. At first he thought it was a neighbor or a traveler passing by, but as the figure drew closer, he saw the concerned expression on the rider's face. The rancher's stomach tightened. He had been expecting this moment, even if he did not know when it would come, the moment someone would question why the girl was living on his ranch. The rider dismounted and approached cautiously. "Are you the man taking care of this child?" he asked. His tone was polite but firm. "We've had reports that a young girl was seen living here alone. Authorities are concerned for her safety." The rancher stood tall, though he felt a wave of tension. He had anticipated questions, but he knew the truth. He had rescued the girl from the river, and he had been keeping her safe ever since. He nodded. "I found her near the river, struggling to survive. I've been making sure she has food, shelter, and safety while I try to locate her family." The rider's expression softened slightly, but there was still doubt in his eyes. "I understand that, but there are procedures. She may need to be placed in protective care until her family can be found." The girl, who had been standing quietly behind the rancher, suddenly stepped forward. She clutched his leg and looked up at him with wide, fearful eyes. The rancher saw the silent message in her gaze. She did not want to leave him. She had survived alone for so long, and now she had found someone she could trust. The thought of being separated terrified her. The rancher knelt beside her and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "I promise I will do everything I can to make sure you are safe," he said quietly, though the words felt heavy with responsibility. The girl's small hand gripped his tightly, as if drawing strength from him. Over the next several days, the tension grew. Authorities and community leaders began asking more questions. They wanted to ensure that the girl was being properly cared for, that her safety was guaranteed, and that her family could be located. The rancher cooperated fully, but was determined to maintain the trust and bond he had built with her. He knew that abrupt separation could be devastating for a child who had already endured so much. The girl seemed to sense the growing tension. She became more cautious, more watchful of strangers, and more protective of the rancher. She followed him even more closely, rarely letting him out of her sight. She began to hide small items in her pockets, a smooth stone, a feather, a piece of wood, little treasures that reminded her of safety and home. The rancher noticed these small acts but never scolded her. Instead, he treated them as a quiet language between them, a way for her to feel secure in a world that suddenly seemed uncertain again. One afternoon, while the rancher was repairing a broken gate, he noticed the girl standing near the river, staring at the water. Her hands were clenched and her face was serious. He walked over slowly. "What is it?" he asked gently. She pointed to the water, then to her chest, and finally made a motion with her hands as if trying to explain something important. Slowly, he realized she was reliving the memory of falling into the river, the fear, the struggle, and the moment she had been rescued. Her small body trembled and tears welled up in her eyes. He knelt beside her and held her carefully, whispering soothing words. "You're safe now, I'm here, you don't have to be afraid." It took time, but eventually she calmed down. She leaned against him, her small hands clutching his shirt. In that quiet moment, the rancher realized just how fragile her trust had been, and how much courage she had needed to survive. It also reinforced his determination to protect her, no matter what obstacles came their way. Soon after, the authorities arrived at the ranch to meet her in person. The rancher explained the situation, introduced her carefully, and watched closely as they spoke. The girl was cautious, almost silent, but she did not hide completely. The rancher stayed near her, offering comfort and reassurance. He knew this moment would test both her courage and the bond they shared. The officials were patient but firm. They asked questions about her well-being, her past, and her current situation. They made notes, took photos, and consulted each other in hushed tones. The rancher answered honestly, emphasizing that he had been caring for her while trying to locate her family. He also spoke of her strength, resilience, and growing confidence. Throughout the visit, the girl's attention never left the rancher. She clung to his hand when she was asked to move, and she looked to him for guidance and reassurance. He knelt beside her, speaking softly, encouraging her to be brave, but never pushing her beyond what she could handle. He understood that trust could not be forced. It had to be nurtured, protected, and respected. After the meeting, the authorities left, promising to continue searching for her family. The rancher and the girl returned to their routine, but the tension lingered. The girl seemed quieter than usual, more contemplative. She followed him around, helping with chores, but her eyes often wandered toward the horizon, as if wondering what the future might hold. The rancher noticed this and realized that their bond would be tested again soon. He began to prepare her gently for the possibility that she might have to leave the ranch temporarily or even permanently. He explained, in simple words she could understand, that her family might be found, and that they would want her back. He assured her that no matter what happened, he would do everything possible to make sure she was safe and cared for. One day, while walking through the fields, the girl suddenly stopped and looked up at him. Her small hands reached for his, gripping tightly. She did not speak, but her expression was clear. She did not want to leave. The rancher knelt beside her and held her close. "I know," he said softly. "I know you're scared. I promise I will be here for you. You don't have to face anything alone." As the days went by, the girl continued to follow him everywhere. She helped with feeding the animals, cleaning the barn, and checking the fences. She even began to participate in small decisions, like which crops to plant or how to arrange the garden. The rancher encouraged her independence while maintaining her sense of safety, careful not to overwhelm her or push her too quickly. Their bond grew stronger with each shared task, each quiet moment, and each small gesture of trust. She brought him small gifts, a feather, a stone, a piece of wood, and he accepted them with gratitude, reinforcing her sense of value and belonging. These acts became a language between them, a way to communicate care, trust, and love without words, but tension continued to build. The rancher knew that eventually, her family or authorities might insist on removing her from the ranch. He worried about how she would react and how to protect her from emotional harm. He spent long evenings thinking about the best way to handle the situation, balancing honesty, patience, and care. He knew that protecting her trust was just as important as keeping her physically safe. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, the girl leaned against him, her small hands clutching his arm. She looked up at him with serious eyes, as if trying to ask a question she could not yet voice. The rancher understood. He whispered gently, "No matter what happens, I will always be here for you. You are safe and you are cared for." She seemed to absorb his words, her expression softening slightly. In that moment, the rancher realized the depth of her trust and the strength of the bond they had formed. It was more than gratitude for saving her life. It was a connection built on shared experience, patience, and quiet understanding. The next few days brought more visitors, inquiries, and challenges. Each time, the rancher remained calm, patient, and protective. The girl watched closely, learning how to navigate the world with caution and confidence. She began to understand that there were people who might question her choices, but that she had someone she could rely on to guide her. Finally, after a particularly tense meeting with local authorities, the rancher and the girl returned to the ranch. They walked slowly along the river, enjoying the quiet, peaceful moments that reminded them both why they had grown so close. She picked up a small stone and handed it to him, her eyes shining. He accepted it, smiling. It was a small gesture, but it carried immense meaning, trust, care, and shared understanding. By the end of this period, the rancher knew that their bond had been tested and had emerged stronger. The girl had faced uncertainty, fear, and the possibility of separation, yet she had remained courageous and loyal. He had learned to balance protection with guidance, patience with honesty, and care with trust. Together, they had grown stronger, more confident, and more connected than ever before. Life on the ranch was no longer just about chores, animals, or land. It was about the bond between two lives that had intersected under extraordinary circumstances. The girl had found safety, trust, and belonging, while the rancher had rediscovered a sense of purpose, responsibility, and the quiet joy of caring for someone who needed him. Though challenges remained, one thing was certain: they would face them together. Their bond was unbreakable, forged through shared experiences, trust, and care. And while the future was still uncertain, the rancher knew that no matter what came next, the girl would always have someone by her side, and he would always have someone to care for, protect, and guide. The days on the ranch were growing longer, warmer, and more peaceful. The girl had grown more confident in her surroundings, moving around the ranch with ease and participating in tasks she had once observed only quietly. She laughed more freely, spoke in small sentences, and sometimes even tried to make him laugh with little jokes or gestures. Her presence had become a part of the ranch, just as the land and animals were. But beneath the peaceful routine, both the rancher and the girl knew that the next chapter of her life was approaching. Her family, or at least people who might help her reconnect with her community, were being searched for by local authorities. Each day brought a mix of hope and tension. She sometimes sat by the river, staring at the water where she had once struggled to survive, and seemed to think about her past. The rancher watched her closely, understanding that she was learning to process the life she had endured before finding him. One morning, he found her gathering small stones and arranging them carefully on the porch. He knelt beside her, curious. She looked up at him and pointed toward the horizon, then touched her chest and made a motion with her hands, as if trying to explain something important. Slowly, he realized that she wanted to express her gratitude, to show how much she valued the safety, trust, and care she had received on the ranch. He smiled softly, taking her hands in his. "I know," he said quietly, "I am proud of you. And you will always be safe with me, no matter what happens." She nodded, her small eyes shining with a mixture of pride and relief. In that moment, he realized that she had learned not only to survive but also to trust, to hope, and to feel connected again. As the day went on, the rancher prepared for the arrival of officials who might help her reconnect with her family. He wanted the process to be smooth and respectful, ensuring that she would not feel frightened or abandoned. He also wanted to maintain the bond they had built, which had become more than just guardian and child. It had become a quiet, unspoken partnership built on trust and care. When the officials arrived, the rancher greeted them calmly, introducing the girl carefully. She stood beside him, her small hands gripping his, her expression cautious but composed. The officials explained that they had been able to locate members of her community and that plans were being made for her safe return. The rancher nodded, listening carefully, and then turned to her, speaking softly. "They've found people who care about you," he said. "You will get to see your family soon, and I will make sure you stay safe until that happens." Her eyes widened, a mixture of fear, uncertainty, and hope crossing her face. She had been alone for so long, and though she trusted him, the thought of leaving the ranch, leaving the place where she had found safety, was frightening. She hesitated, looking up at him as if seeking reassurance. The rancher knelt beside her, holding her hands gently. "You are brave," he said. "You have survived so much, and now you will see people who love you. But remember, no matter where you go, I will always be here for you." After some moments of quiet thought, she nodded slowly. Her small hand tightened on his for a moment, then relaxed. She understood in her own way that this was part of her journey, that trust, courage, and connection could exist in many forms. She was ready to take the next step, even if it was difficult. The following days were filled with preparation. The rancher helped her pack a small bag with her belongings, including a few stones, feathers, and other small treasures she had collected. He also made sure she had clothing, food, and comfort items for the journey. Throughout it all, he encouraged her to ask questions, express her feelings, and share any fears. He knew that this process was just as important emotionally as it was physically. Finally, the day came when the community members arrived to bring her home. The girl's small hands clutched the rancher's tightly as they approached. She looked around the ranch one last time, taking in the land, the animals, and the quiet beauty she had come to love. She looked up at him, her eyes filled with gratitude and affection. The rancher knelt beside her. "You are ready," he said softly. "Be brave, be strong, and remember that you are never alone. You have courage in your heart, and you will always have someone who cares for you." Tears welled in her eyes, but she nodded. She hugged him tightly, pressing her small face against his chest. He held her, feeling the warmth and trust she had offered so freely over the past weeks. In that moment, words were unnecessary. They had shared experiences, challenges, and quiet moments that no words could fully capture. The community members approached gently, speaking kindly and guiding her forward. She looked back at the rancher one last time, then took a deep breath and walked with them. The rancher watched, standing tall but feeling the quiet ache of separation. He knew it was the right thing, but it did not make letting go any easier. As she disappeared down the path toward her family, he felt a mixture of pride, sadness, and relief. She was safe, cared for, and about to reconnect with the life she had been separated from. Yet he also realized how much she had changed him. Her trust, resilience, and courage had reminded him of the beauty of connection, responsibility, and quiet love. Over the following days, the rancher returned to his routines on the ranch. He fed the animals, repaired fences, and tended to the fields, but the rhythm of his life had shifted. The quiet had returned, but it was now filled with memories of laughter, small gestures, and shared moments with the girl. He often found himself pausing by the river or sitting on the porch, thinking of her, wondering how she was doing, and hoping she was safe and happy. Weeks later, he received word that the girl had safely reunited with her family. The letters described her joy, her curiosity, and her newfound confidence. She spoke of the ranch, the animals, and the man who had saved her from the river and protected her with patience and care. The rancher smiled, knowing that his actions had left a lasting impact on her life, just as her presence had left a lasting impact on his. Even though she was no longer living on the ranch, the bond they had formed remained. He realized that life was full of unexpected connections, moments that could change the course of two lives forever. One small act of courage, rescuing her from the river, had led to weeks of shared experience, trust, and growth. Both of them had learned lessons that would stay with them for the rest of their lives. The rancher continued his work on the land, but the ranch no longer felt empty. He carried her memory with him in the quiet moments, in the way he cared for the animals, and in the way he noticed the small details of the land. He knew that somewhere the girl was safe, happy, and thriving, and that she would carry the lessons of trust, courage, and care that they had shared. Occasionally, letters arrived from her, simple notes describing her life, her thoughts, and her gratitude. Each letter was a reminder that their bond had not been broken by distance or circumstance. It had been strengthened by trust, patience, and shared experience. The rancher kept every letter, rereading them in quiet moments, feeling a sense of connection that transcended the miles between them. He often reflected on the journey they had shared. He thought about the river, the first moments of fear and desperation, and how a single act of kindness had led to a lifetime of lessons. He realized that the world was full of challenges, but also full of opportunities to make a difference in someone's life. And sometimes, the smallest gestures, rescuing a child, offering patience, showing trust, could have the most profound impact. The rancher continued to live on the land he loved, but now his heart carried the warmth of a bond that could never be broken. He had learned that life was not only about survival and work, but also about connection, care, and the quiet moments that build trust between people. And somewhere, beyond the hills and rivers, a young girl thrived, knowing she had been loved, protected, and guided by someone who had believed in her when the world seemed uncertain. In the end, the story of the rancher and the girl was one of courage, trust, and hope. It was a story of how one act of kindness could ripple through lives, changing them forever. And though they were apart, the connection they shared continued to shape them, reminding them both of the quiet, enduring power of human care and compassion.